I still remember the sound of the door slamming behind me. Sharp, final, like the crack of a gavel in a courtroom. Brandon didn't even flinch. He stood there in his pressed suit, arms crossed over his chest, face twisted in annoyance. Not guilt, not even regret, just inconvenience. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. I was 27, pregnant, and standing in the marble hallway of a luxury high-rise with nothing but a battered suitcase and my dignity clutched in trembling hands. "You'll figure something out," he said coldly, as if I were a stray dog he'd left on the side of the road. I didn't cry. Not then. Not while I squeezed myself into the elevator with people who deliberately avoided eye contact. Not when the doorman, who used to call me Mrs. Hale with a smile, suddenly looked away as I shuffled out into the pouring rain. It wasn't until I was halfway down Lexington Avenue, soaked to the skin, that the first tear slipped free. And even then, I wasn't crying for Brandon. I was crying for the girl I used to be, the girl who had believed in fairy tales. I sat in a cheap motel room, the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead competing with the pounding in my head. The suitcase sat open on the bed. My life reduced to a few pairs of jeans, a cracked phone, and a sonogram picture tucked carefully inside an old novel. I checked my bank account for the 100th time. $37.14. Not even enough for another night here. And Brandon. He'd moved on already. The society pages had wasted no time splashing his face alongside a new it-girl lawyer, a blonde with movie star teeth and a trust fund thicker than my medical files. I tried to reach out once. Just once. A desperate, foolish call that went straight to voicemail. And then I stopped trying. Because somewhere deep inside I knew I was on my own. The baby kicked for the first time while I was folding clothes at a secondhand store. I dropped the tiny onesie I was holding and gasped, pressing my hand against the swell of my stomach. A flicker of life. A reminder that even though Brandon had discarded me like yesterday's news, I was still someone's everything. After my shift, I curled up in the break room with a cold sandwich and a stack of junk mail. That's when I saw it. A battered, crumpled letter with my name scrawled across it. No return address. I almost threw it out, assuming it was another bill. But something made me tear it open. The letter inside was short, blunt. It read, "To my granddaughter, Anna Grace. If you're reading this, I'm gone. You don't know me, but I know you. Enclosed is the key to everything you've ever deserved. Find your home. Find your strength. M." There was no enclosed anything, at least not at first. But tucked inside the envelope, almost missed, was a tiny iron key. It looked ancient, heavy, real. My mind raced. My parents had died when I was young, or so I thought. I'd been raised in foster care until Brandon's family swooped in and rescued me when we were still teenagers. It hadn't felt like a rescue. It had felt like an arrangement, project, a way for Brandon to play the role of a savior. I stared at the key for a long time, feeling it warm against my palm. Strength. Was it possible that someone had actually been looking out for me all along? I started calling around during my lunch breaks, using the store's dusty old computer when no one was looking. No luck. M wasn't much to go on. I almost gave up, until I noticed a tiny etching on the key itself. Sycamore Lane. I Googled it. There was a Sycamore Lane on the outskirts of the city. A forgotten place, mostly industrial lots and run-down houses. Didn't make sense. But then again, nothing in my life did anymore. The next morning before my shift started, I stuffed the key into my pocket, grabbed my backpack, and boarded a bus heading east. The bus shuddered to a stop in front of a cracked sidewalk lined with dying trees. First I thought it was a mistake. The street looked abandoned. Houses sagging like old men. Windows boarded up or broken. I started walking. The address numbers were almost invisible under the grime. I passed 240, 242. And then there it was. 244 Sycamore Lane. It didn't look like much. A peeling white Victorian with a lopsided porch and a front door hanging off its hinges. But when I climbed the steps and pressed the key into the lock, it slid in smoothly. like it had been waiting for me. The door creaked open, and inside was everything. Dust motes danced in the sunlight filtering through stained glass windows. The furniture was old but sturdy, covered in sheets. Bookshelves lined every wall, overflowing with faded volumes. And everywhere, in every room, were photographs. Photographs of me. Baby pictures. School pictures. Even a snapshot from my wedding, one I didn't even know existed. My throat closed up. Whoever M was, they had been watching over me all along. On the dining room table, under a thick layer of dust, sat a worn leather binder. When I opened it, I found deeds, bank statements, investments, all in my name. The house was mine. The money was mine. And tucked into the very back, barely hanging together, was a letter dated 6 years earlier. Anna Grace, they told me you were lost. But you're not lost anymore. This is your legacy. Use it wisely. They tried to take everything from you. Don't let them. I sat down hard in one of the chairs. The air knocked clean out of me. For the first time in months, I wasn't terrified. I wasn't hopeless. I was angry. And anger was a powerful thing. The next few months were a blur. I fixed up the house little by little, using the funds from the accounts left to me. Got my GED. Enrolled in online business courses. Had the baby, a beautiful girl I named Hope, and promised her she would never feel the way I had. Hope gave me a reason to fight harder, push further. And as the months turned into a year, something else happened. The investments left behind by M, silent shares in real estate, tech startups, and a few gold mines in obscure parts of the country, exploded in value. Suddenly, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. But I stayed quiet about it. I stayed smart. Because I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Brandon didn't know it yet. But the woman he had thrown out with nothing but a suitcase was about to rewrite every page of the story he thought he had finished. And the first place I was going to start. His precious law firm. I didn't rush. That's the thing about revenge. If you serve it too soon, it's just anger. If you serve it cold, it becomes justice. First, I learned everything I could about Brandon's law firm, Hale and Royce LLP. Once, it had been the crown jewel of the city's legal scene, winning multimillion-dollar settlements and gracing glossy magazine covers. Now, it was bleeding from the inside. Whispers of malpractice, infighting between partners, financial mismanagement, and Brandon, was too arrogant to see the cracks forming beneath his feet. Perfect. Through an alias, AG Holdings, I started quietly buying stakes in their debt. Small, unremarkable notes at first. A silent investor here, a quiet lien there. No one paid attention to the girl with the infant tucked against her chest in thrift store jeans. Within 8 months, I held enough leverage to force a meeting. Not with Brandon directly. No, that would tip my hand too early. Instead, I asked for a sit-down with the firm's senior financial officer, pretending to represent a potential new partner interested in asset revitalization. Big words, big promises, all dressed up to look like salvation. On the morning of the meeting, I stood in front of the cracked mirror in the hallway of my house on Sycamore Lane. Gone were the hand-me-downs and scuffed shoes. I wore a tailored navy suit, sharp enough to cut glass. My hair was pinned into a sleek twist. Minimal jewelry. Steady hands. Hope, now just over a year old, babbled from her playpen, tossing a stuffed rabbit into the air. I leaned down, kissed her soft forehead and whispered, "This is for us." Then I walked out the door. Hale and Royce's offices had changed. Gone was the marble grandeur I remembered from charity galas and client parties. Now the lobby was dimmer, quieter. The receptionist barely glanced up as I approached. "I'm here for the 10 a.m. with Mr. Levine," I said smoothly, handing over a business card with AG Holdings embossed in clean gold lettering. 10 minutes later, I was ushered into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. And there he was, Mr. Levine, the CFO, sweating through his collar, stammering as he poured coffee into chipped mugs. I made the offer simple. AG Holdings would assume some of the firm's debt in exchange for silent partnership rights and restructuring input. Translation: I would own them, without Brandon even realizing it. Levine practically fell over himself accepting the terms. Desperation dripped from every word. Within days, rumors swept through the firm. New investors are coming. Fresh capital will save us. Maybe we'll survive after all. Brandon swaggered through the halls, convinced that he had once again landed on his feet. Poor foolish Brandon. He didn't realize he was dancing on quicksand. 2 weeks later, I saw him for the first time since that night on Lexington Avenue. It was accidental, or so it seemed. I had come to the firm for a routine walkthrough under my investor's rights. Brandon was exiting a conference room, laughing too loudly, hand brushing the back of a young paralegal. The sight of him hit me harder than I expected. Same tailored suits, same smug grin. But he looked smaller now, thinner, grayer at the temples. As he passed, our eyes met. For a heartbeat he frowned. Recognition flickered. But before he could place me, I turned away, letting the receptionist usher me down the hall. Let him wonder. Let him doubt. Let him fear. Outside the walls of Hale and Royce, something else was happening. The businesses I inherited through M's investments were booming. One of them, a boutique venture capital firm, began funding women-led startups at an unprecedented scale. The media noticed. The headlines started quietly. Mystery heiress disrupts VC world. AG Holdings. Who is the woman behind the curtain? From homeless to headlines. The hidden mogul no one saw coming. Photographers tried to snap pictures of me, but I stayed elusive. Until I decided it was time. I agreed to one interview. One. For the biggest business magazine in the country. The journalist, a sharp woman named Nora, met me at a neutral location, a sunlit garden tucked behind a museum. Hope sat on my lap, tugging at my necklace while Nora asked questions. I told the story carefully, truthfully, about betrayal, about survival, about rebirth. But I never mentioned Brandon's name. That wasn't necessary. People could fill in the blanks. By the time the article hit stands, my face was plastered across newsstands, websites, TV specials. The comeback queen, they called me. And Hale and Royce. The vultures began to circle. It wasn't long before the other partners started questioning Brandon's leadership. If he was so brilliant, why was the firm drowning while the woman he kicked out with a suitcase was gracing the cover of Forbes? The whispering turned into arguments. The arguments turned into meetings behind closed doors. And finally, one rainy Thursday afternoon, Brandon received an email with a single line. Board meeting. Mandatory attendance. 5 p.m. I arrived 15 minutes early. Hope was at home with her nanny, safe and sound. I wore black this time. Dark, clean, absolute. The boardroom buzzed with tension as I took my seat at the head of the table. The partners filed in one by one, eyes darting toward me, then away. And then Brandon walked in. He froze in the doorway. For a split second, I saw the boy I had once loved. The boy who had whispered promises under starlight. The boy who had slammed the door on me without a second thought. That boy was dead. All that remained was a man about to lose everything. He opened his mouth to speak. Maybe to protest, maybe to grovel. I lifted a hand. Easy. Commanding. The room fell silent. I stood slowly, letting the power of the moment stretch. I'm sure you're all wondering why we're here, I said, my voice clear and even. I placed a thick folder on the table and slid it forward. Inside were the contracts, the debt notes, the legal agreements, proof that, piece by piece, I had purchased controlling interest in Hale and Royce. I am now the majority shareholder, I said. A beat of stunned silence. And effective immediately, I'm initiating a full leadership restructure. I let my gaze land squarely on Brandon, starting with the removal of Brandon Hale from all executive functions. His face drained of color. You can't do this, he choked out. "This is my firm." I tilted my head slightly. "Was your firm," I corrected. "Now it's mine." The partners didn't defend him. No one did. They simply looked down at their papers, pretending not to hear his desperate, strangled pleas. When security arrived to escort him out, he didn't resist. He just wilted. A man undone by his own cruelty. That night, as I tucked Hope into her crib, I looked out the window at the glittering city skyline. It had taken everything, every scar, every sleepless night, every whispered prayer to get here. But I had made it, on my own terms. Hope stirred in her sleep, clutching her rabbit. I smiled softly. This wasn't the end of the story. Not yet. There was still one final act left. And it would be the most public, most devastating twist of all. If removing Brandon from the firm was justice, what came next was something greater. Not revenge. Restoration. I wasn't interested in just taking his title. I wanted to expose the rot he had hidden for years, the same rot that had left me homeless and pregnant on a cold city street. And the world was hungry for it. First it was just chatter online. Whispers of Hale and Royce's financial misconduct. Anonymous blogs hinting at misuse of client funds. Social media posts pulling receipts from public court documents. Then the real reporters started sniffing around, digging deeper. Someone leaked, anonymously, internal memos from Brandon's office. Documents showing falsified expenses, double-billed hours, even secret settlements with clients who had threatened to sue. Of course, I couldn't possibly say who leaked those. I just watched as the fire spread. Brandon tried to mount a defense, tried to paint himself as a wronged man, betrayed by ungrateful colleagues and bad management. But no one was buying it. Not when every headline screamed betrayal. Top lawyer under investigation for fraud. Hale's house of cards comes crashing down. Former wife turned mogul speaks out on survival. That last one was my favorite. He lost his bar license. His assets were frozen. And when he was finally served with a subpoena, the photos made the front page of every major newspaper. The same man who had kicked his pregnant wife onto the street was now standing in the rain, in a wrinkled suit, ducking into a cab with reporters swarming around him. Poetic, wasn't it? While Brandon collapsed, I rose higher. G Holdings went public. Our first IPO broke records, making headlines not just for the numbers, but for what we represented. A company founded by a woman who had refused to stay broken. I launched scholarships for young women in foster care, started shelters for pregnant teens with nowhere to go, created business incubators for women who had been overlooked too many times. Hope's name was woven into every project, because this was about her too, about every child who deserved better. The day the Women of the Year magazine cover dropped, I sat on the porch of the house on Sycamore Lane, Hope curled in my lap, a warm spring breeze stirring the air. There I was on the glossy front page. Strong. Smiling with Hope perched on my hip. The headline read, "From Suitcase to CO. How Anna Grace Changed Everything." Inside, the article told the full story. My story. But it also told our story. Every woman who had been underestimated, discarded, or betrayed and had clawed her way back. Brandon's name wasn't even mentioned. He didn't matter anymore. I hadn't seen him, really seen him, since the day he was escorted out of Hale and Royce. But fate, it seemed, wasn't quite done. It happened at a charity gala 6 months later. One of those black tie affairs where champagne flows and secrets spill easier than the drinks. I attended at the request of a business partner, trying to blend in quietly. And then, across the crowded room, I saw him. Brandon. He was almost unrecognizable. Gone was the gleaming arrogance. Gone was the polished, untouchable aura. He looked tired, defeated, older than his years. He stood alone by the bar, nursing a drink like it was the only thing keeping him upright. For a moment our eyes met, and for the first time I felt nothing. No hatred, no anger, no sadness, just closure. He looked away first. Later that night, I was asked to say a few words. I stood at the podium. The room hushed, hundreds of glittering eyes fixed on me. I spoke of second chances, of resilience, of the homes we lose and the ones we build anew. I never mentioned Brandon. I didn't need to. Everyone knew. When I finished, the applause rolled through the hall like thunder. Hope, sitting near the front in her little satin dress, clapped her tiny hands furiously, beaming. That was the only ovation I needed. On the anniversary of finding the house on Sycamore Lane, I took Hope for a walk through the neighborhood. The trees, once gnarled and dying, had started to bloom again. The sidewalks were cleaner. The houses, one by one, were coming back to life. We passed a mural painted on the side of an old grocery store. It was of a woman, strong, proud, her hands raised in triumph. Beneath it, a quote, "They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds." Hope tugged at my hand, pointing up at the mural with wide, amazed eyes. "Is that you, Mommy?" she asked. Smiled. "No, baby," I said, scooping her into my arms. "That's all of us." Brandon disappeared from public life. Last I heard, he was working at a small legal aid office in a town no one could pronounce. And me, kept building, kept giving, kept living, not for revenge, not for recognition, but for the little girl who believed in me before the world did. And for the woman I had finally become. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story and tell us where you're watching from.